All right, so here we go for the last homework of the term and the last homework for chapter 5. So we'll talk about 5.7, 5.8, and 5.11. So in 5.7, you basically just needed to identify the adverb clauses. An important point to keep in mind here is that these adverb clauses are dependent clauses. And when dependent clauses begin the sentence, they must be followed by a comma. So that's an important punctuation tip to keep in mind, that when you begin a sentence with a dependent clause, it must be followed by a comma. So we can see in number 6 that we have the dependent clause after people have been forced to speak French in government affairs for 3 centuries. So notice we have the subordinate conjunction after, then we have the subject of this clause, people, and the verb of this clause, had been. So remember, we said that adjective clauses begin with relative pronouns like which and whose, while adverb clauses begin with subordinate conjunctions. So that's a key distinction to keep in mind between adverb and adjective clauses. Number 7, again, we have a subordinate conjunction even though. We have the subject of our dependent clause English, and then the verb was. Right? This dependent clause begins the sentence, so it must be followed by a comma. The comma after people signals, hey, this next word, this next noun, that's the subject of our independent clause. Right? So the comma says, hello, hello, a person is the subject. That's the main subject of the independent clause. Number 8, in 1380, as English began to be resurrected. So notice here we have 2 commas. We have in 1380, comma. So we've marked that prepositional phrase. We separate it. And then we have the subordinate conjunction as, the subject of the dependent clause English, the verb of the dependent clause began, and again the comma signals that the next noun is the subject of the independent clause. Number 9, because there was no printing press in England in the 14th century, comma, and then copies is the subject of the independent clause. So keep in mind, because is a subordinate conjunction. Because is not a coordinating conjunction. Because does not get punctuated like we punctuate and but, right? But that's a common error, that people punctuate because just like it's and. It's not punctuated like that. Okay. Number 10, in the 15th century, as Britain developed economically. So we have the adverb clause, as Britain developed economically. So let's look at 5.8. So this is an important section because it helps us make that distinction between adjective and adverb clauses. So we need to keep in mind that adjective clauses answer questions like which one and what kind, while adverb clauses are telling us things like where this happened, why it happened, how it happened, in what manner it happened. So in number 6 from 5.8, we have plays that were written more than 500 years ago by Shakespeare. So this answers that adjective question of, well, what plays are you talking about, Robert? I'm talking about the plays that were written more than 400 years ago. So that were written by more than 400 years ago is identifying the noun plays. Which plays? So that's an adjective. In 7, Shakespeare is still so popular that many American university students could probably name one of his plays. So notice that clause here follows an adjective popular. It is not telling us anything about a noun, right? So that means it's got to be an adverb, right? It's telling us about an adjective, and from chapter 1, we said adverbs modify adjectives. Number 8, an interesting linguistic exercise that students can do. So again, what kind of exercise? One that students can do. So this is answering that essential adjective question, which one? Number 9, English was considered so vulgar that. So again, that clause here, sorry, I know this gets a little crazy with the this and that. That clause in number 9 is not telling us anything about a noun. Number 10, however, it is telling us about the exam. Which exam are you talking about? Oh, I'm talking about the exam that was taken to get into Harvard. So 10 is an adjective. Okay, the final section asked us to identify noun clauses and say what it's doing in the sentence. This is just an important exercise to help you see how noun clauses are different. Now, I'm not going to ask you on the final exam to say what the function of the noun clause is. I'm not going to ask you to say it's a direct object, it's a subject. But I do think just by keeping this in mind, it will help you to identify noun clauses. So number 6 is kind of a strange one. It's in a positive. The belief equals that living languages don't change. So 6 is kind of a strange one, and we won't have one like that on the final. But let's look at 7, 8, 9, and 10. So in 7, Shakespeare believed this, right? So I can substitute the that clause with a pronoun. So basically what I want you to see is, because you can substitute the pronoun here, that makes it a noun clause. I'm less interested that you can identify it as a direct object, but it's more important for you to be able to say, this clause is not an adjective clause. It's not telling me about a noun. This clause is not an adverb clause. It's not modifying an adverb, a verb, or an adjective. This clause is a noun clause. So in number 8, we can substitute the pronoun it. It makes his writing even more historically important. So again, we can substitute a pronoun that shows us that this has to be a noun clause. Do you know this? We can substitute a pronoun, shows us this is a noun clause. I wonder this. I wonder that. Okay, so again, we can see that this is a noun clause. So again, on the final exam, you don't have to say what the function of the noun clause is, but you will have a few sentences where you just have to decide this is a noun clause, this is an adjective clause, this is an adverb clause.